Natalie, Natalie Burrell, welcome to the LinkedIn Live, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Scotty. Thanks for having me.
It's my absolute pleasure. So anybody who's watched these before, and I think you and I talked about it, that it's not like we're getting, hundreds of viewers yet. But anybody who's watched this before knows that I generally have to just go and confirm a few things, just, make sure that the technology is working. And so in order for me to do that, I'm going to start with a bit of an icebreaker here. And, we were talking about it off camera. We were trying to come up with a good thing to discuss. And you mentioned a childhood dream of yours that I would love to see. I think it can solve all of our transportation issues. So I'm gonna turn the time over to you for just a second here to expound on that idea, that game-changing idea, and I'll be right back. Okay.
Sounds good. So we were talking about like this or that. So the idea was, would you rather teleport or fly? And so then I started telling Scotty about when I was a little kid, I had this like grand idea, and I really thought it was going to happen, that the world would be connected, and like we would like jump on the water slide that would like leave our house, and that one like went to work, and that one went to school. And I mean, I don't know that I wasn't like a transportation genius by any means, but for somehow in my mind, I thought, even weather wasn't really, maybe they were tubes, but I think in my childhood dream of this, they were like definitely open air water slides. And no problem that people were wearing swimsuits all the time, right? But yep, the world was connected via water slides, and it was like my Jetson moment in Natalie version of the future was connected via water slide. So given that, though you didn't ask me the question, I feel like that's a little bit of like a teleporting, not so much flying, which I probably think is not a popular answer, but teleporting, water sliding. I think I'm in that direction.
All right, Governor Cox, if you're watching, make it happen, sir, please. No, thanks for that. I do. I think that's it'd be amazing. I mean, seriously. But again, thank you so much for joining. I want to properly introduce you. So Natalie Burrell has been an executive leader in the technology space for the better part of a decade. Obviously started when she was, a teenager. And she's joining us today to talk about her career history. Obviously the most recent, for anybody who's looking at your LinkedIn profile right now, I put it up for everyone to see. The most recent position being SVP at Entrada. And so we're going to just jump off or I should say, start this thing right off and jump into the questions. So the first question I have for you, Natalie, is what brought you to a career in technology? And, insofar as you did, how did you choose it?
Yeah, well, again, thanks for having me, Scotty. It's exciting to be here, and it'll be fun to have a little chit chat with you. Like you mentioned, I'm Natalie, and I've been in a technology oriented role for, dare I admit, like a couple decades. So it's been a minute. I have always been interested in technology from a young age, even though I'm a little older than the people who've been, introduced to technology always. My parents were early adopters of technology always. So I grew up with a Commodore 64 computer, and we had a laser disc player, and we had like a CD player in our car, I think one of the first CD players where you put the CD in like a cartridge, and then you put the cartridge in we just so they always kind of were early adopters of technology. And so I think being around technology certainly influenced and played it in inevitably what my career became, but I didn't intentionally start out in technology. Although I worked for a software company, I worked for a SaaS company in the early 2000s. I was on the operations side. I was an operations manager. So we were working with the software to make the business operations happen. And I was working with the engineering group to revamp and launch a new version of the product. And so working with them as a business stakeholder to identify what needed to change, what the problems were to solve, all of that sort of thing. And the CTO at the time saw my ability to bridge like the business and technology and solve business problems through technology, and just the way that I was able to kind of translate business speak to technical speak and vice versa. He just saw that it was like a natural capability of mine and was like, I want to draft you to my team. So he did. He asked me to join his team, and I've been in a technology role ever since.
I sense some foreshadowing in that answer right there, and yeah, that's cool. I know you and I have talked about it in the past, but it's been a minute, so I appreciate you telling the story. And yeah, the digital natives, right? The kids that are growing up with like fully online. I mean, you're about as close to that as you could be, given that what you had in the house, technology.
Given the year I was born, right? Yeah.
Very cool. So what about some highlights for you throughout your career? To your point, I mean, it seems like you've been a leader most of your career, but can you kind of just tell us what your highlights have been throughout that time?
Sure. So, big things matter, of course. And so I've done all sorts of exciting things in my career, like big product launches, cloud infrastructure projects, large scale master data management initiatives, digital and agile transformations. But I've concluded that for me, the things that are highlights for my career are much smaller and quieter. So for example, a couple of years ago, I was at Silicon Slope Summit and kind of talking to people, doing my thing, just connecting. And a woman came up to me, and she happened to be a master's degree student at BYU. And she was talking to me about her capstone project, an idea for her capstone project. And she described this idea about putting on a coding camp for high school girls, but it wasn't like your typical coding camp. It wasn't like, a lot of them are about like, you want to code, so here, come here and like learn to code, or like take your coding to the next level. It was more about like for girls who know nothing about it or don't really know that that's what they want to do. It was to help immerse them or introduce them to that. And absolutely that piece of it, there's more to like technical careers than just like being a developer, as an example. And as she described it to me, I really loved the concept. I was like, this is great, because it's technical careers are so much more multifaceted than just like one, like being a software engineer, right? And so I thought it was a fantastic idea, and I let her know that, and I let her know. I just said, hey, if there's anything I can do to help, like please let me know. We exchanged contact information, and she did. She hit me up, and we ended up helping them host their first code adventure. It was last summer, and they'll put it on, and it was great. It was wonderful. It was a great success. 50 girls, 3 days. It was wonderful. But that's not the highlight. The highlight came after it was done, and it was just a simple note from her. And she said to me, I just wanted you to know that it was your words of encouragement at the Silicon Slope Summit that compelled me to continue with my idea and to put this thing on. And like her doing that and just taking the time just to let me know that I don't know, it was so impactful to me that you just never know the impact your words might have on someone. And it was a simple conversation I had with her, and it just, I don't know. So that was a highlight for me. And really quick, I'll just give one more. In an interview for a role, and I think it was like a third round interview. So it was a panel interview. And so it was via Zoom. We put, so we had joined, internally we'd joined, and then we were waiting for the candidate. She jumps on, and she kind of had a little bit of a surprised look on her face. And she actually remarked, she was like, I'm surprised. I've never experienced this before. And she talked about how significant it was that on this call, every single leader was a woman. And she'd never experienced that in her life before. And just being like that, how that just being in an interview with all these other women that were leaders at this organization, just immediately how it impacted her already. Like just, wow, didn't even realize it could be a thing or needed to be a thing. It wasn't intentional on our part, but it was the team that had been created, right? And that's a huge passion project of mine. That's something that matters to me. Women in tech, women in leadership, diversity, representation. And so that coming, like her just acknowledging that and then kind of like sitting back and seeing that right in front of me, like it just like it hit me in a way that I was like, this is why I do what I do. So
Awesome. I love it. Yeah, I mean, with regard to being the little things, I don't know. I think those are huge, frankly. I mean, to your point, representation matters, and obviously, I know you're a champion of it. And so I'm thrilled to hear you share those stories, because who knows, maybe somebody watching today takes what you just said and runs with it as well, right? So super cool. Thanks so much for sharing. Um, Okay, so we're going to switch gears a little bit here. And so I've had the pleasure of working with you before. I know you've obviously been in the mortgage space. You've been software as a service now, looks like a couple of times in your career. And then we worked together in healthcare staffing. I'm curious, how does technology vary across the different industries that you've worked in, Natalie?
it's a great question. I think that for me, the technologies has varied, but I think a lot of that variability has been just based on like the company and kind of how they got their start, and the tech stack has varied just as a result of that. And even because I've had a longer tenure, I think even the way that companies operate and products are built has changed throughout the years, right? So even accessibility, desktop versus web-based versus mobile, and just introduction of those things or more emphasis one way or another has changed. I don't know if it's industry specific necessarily, but I do think there are some nuances there that could be. But however, I do think there are some specific needs and challenges of each industry. For example, in healthcare, there's a lot of emphasis on data privacy and security. So you have to, make sure that things are encrypted and you're ensuring that all of that, is safe and sound. Whereas in finance, not that that kind of information doesn't also need to be secure, but the focus might be more around speed and efficiency and automation and making sure that again, to that efficiency piece, things are just like flowing and automatic. So it's important to understand the unique requirements of each industry and how technology can be tailored to meet those needs and like solve their unique problems.
Indeed. Okay. Very cool. I'm curious, and this I realize this is a follow-up question that we didn't prepare for, but I hear a little bit about domain-driven design. It sounds like you're kind of talking a little bit about that with the examples that you just gave. Is that kind of, I mean, is that what you're referring to when you talk about those particular examples, or is that just a layperson who doesn't necessarily know technology as well as I would like to?
The examples I gave were a little bit more specific to the industries than domain driven, because even in domain driven, you can have it be, there's variability, like at Entrada, there's variability in how we would address that even within the same platform, right?
Makes sense.
So, but it also could be that the platform of Entrada is so broad that
Sure.
it almost, even though it's property management or prop tech, it's partially finance, and then like there's business operations and all these different facets that actually could potentially be like industry in a way, like quantified as industry. So
That makes sense.
it's an interesting concept that I haven't really. I'd have to think on that, Scotty.
Well, and I learn from you every time we talk, Natalie. So thank you for that. That's awesome. It's top of mind for us. So very cool. Okay. Again, switching gears now to talk more about like throughout your career. There's a couple of things that I suspect have been important, and I want to get your take on what advice would you offer to somebody kind of early to mid-career with regard to networking? Obviously a business buzzword, but I think you know what I'm referring to. I'm talking about building your professional network.
Yep. So networking, to borrow from Nike, just do it. I think it's just get yourself out there. I know it can be intimidating, but I think a lot of people feel that way, and so I think just get yourself out there and just do it. I didn't do it earlier in my career. I didn't know about it. I didn't know how. I don't know that it was as much a thing back then. It probably was, but I may have just been ignorant to it. But things like LinkedIn and different networking groups that like locally, like Women Tech Council and just these other, there's plenty of them out there, like meetup groups and stuff like that. either didn't exist or they did, but just awareness of them wasn't as prevalent. And so I just didn't really network. I probably did just at my workplace, but that was about it, but I think there's so many opportunities now, like just get yourself out there and be brave. And also though, my biggest piece of advice about approaching network is doing it with a genuine interest in learning and connecting with others. Don't just do it with the mindset of what can this person do for me or what can I get out of this? If you do, it's going to fall flat. If you take the time to build real relationships with people and try to learn something new from every interaction, that's when it really will be like mutually beneficial, a two-way street. You'll gain all the right benefits from the networking.
I love that. I do. I think that was really important point. And I'll go as far as to say focus on the quality over quantity. So for instance, if you're talking about the Women in Technology Council, if there's an event, it's not about how many people you talk to, it's about the quality of the conversation, even if it's just with one new person, right? So again, I think that's great advice and very, very practical advice. It's always, it's simple, not easy, right?
So, absolutely. And you can feel it too, like when you're at an event like that, and like you can tell when somebody is not all that genuinely interested in making that connection and they're like on to the next. Doesn't feel good. So like my rule of thumb is then, would I ever want to make someone feel that way? Heck no. So like, it's a little bit of that golden rule, right?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, again, I think it sounds like, my takeaway from what you're saying is make sure it's something you're really passionate about, whatever the topic might be. And then just, again, try and focus on the genuine and authentic connection as opposed to making it like a numbers game or whatever it might be. Okay,
That's
very
why
cool.
I love like things like Meetup, because there's so many, you can find, you can find like really interesting niches too. So you can find the thing you're passionate about.
Absolutely. Okay, very cool. What about, this is related to networking, but how have mentors played a role in your career?
To your point, I think they're very connected, and mentors have been really critical to my success. I've been fortunate to have mentors throughout my career. They offer guidance, encouragement, support, navigation through difficult situations, invaluable insight either, into industries. Like I've changed industries at multiple times. And so if you find mentors in the industries that you work in, I mean, that's a gold mine. And I truly believe that like mentors can make a huge difference in your career. It's also just similar to networking. It's something I didn't have earlier on in my career. Again, I think I just didn't realize and understand and know. So I've made it a point to either create, participate in, or help to organize and run a variety of mentorship programs in whatever capacity I can throughout my career. So if your workplace has one, get involved. If they don't, see how you might be able to establish one. And then I also think it's good to have mentors at your workplace, but also outside of your workplace, because both offer different perspectives that are extremely valuable. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention that, like for me, I've learned so much as both a mentor and a mentee. Like it's not just a one-way street, right? Like as a mentor, you're imparting all of this wisdom. It's not really like that at all. Like as being a mentor, like you learn a lot from the person you're mentoring to. And I think it's a pretty amazing experience on both sides.
I love that. Yeah, that's a great takeaway there, to your point that as the mentor, you're going to learn a lot from the people that you're mentoring. And I guess from a practical standpoint, if you were to give some practical advice to somebody who is interested in finding a mentor, any specific area like advice you would offer in that area?
Like I said, so a lot of workplaces will have like mentor programs. So I'd suggest, finding out if your workplace does. One of the things, like Women Tech Council does these sort of 3x3 mentoring workshops every, I think, quarterly.
Love it.
Pretty like women out there. And I don't think it's intended to only be for women either, but that's a great place. And I do think like you could probably look online and even just look for, mentoring opportunities. And I think also it's a way to, in your network, once you've established a connection with someone in your network, I mean, ask. I know, like you just ask someone to be your mentor, and you can either make it official or you could even just sort of, it's a unspoken sort of thing that is your mentor. Like some of the people that I consider mentors, I don't know that it's not been explicitly spoken, hey, you're my mentor, I'm your mentee necessarily. So
Yeah, no, that's great. I love it. That's appreciate that practical advice. And I think to your point, doesn't have to be formal. I think if you ask someone for advice on something, the one thing I would say is just make sure you follow up and tell them how it went. Right? Maybe ask a follow-up question as well. Like, this is the advice you gave me. Here's how it went. Thank you so much. And then a follow-up question. And then all of a sudden, now you've taken a relationship that you've had prior and basically turned it into a mentoring opportunity, right? So very cool. Okay, so that then is, I think, a good segue into what is one piece of advice that you would give your younger self? Yep, I'm just going to leave it at that.
Okay, well, I don't think I can contain myself to only one, so I'm going to definitely break that rule.
Fair enough.
And maybe I start there, breaking rules. Maybe it's not breaking them, but like, don't worry too much about the rules. I think I was a little bit too rigid and sort of intentional about some of that stuff when I was younger, which parlays into like perfectionism. And I think a lot of women and girls are often, they err on the side of perfection, and perfection is how we have to operate. And it's not. Perfection isn't the key. It's progress, and it's progress over perfection. And I think honing the capability to understand how much effort to put into a task or a project or whatever it might be, like, is a huge skill, like a very valuable skill to develop. Take risks and experiment. I think, again, that's almost that fear of failure that goes along with that perfectionism. But doing that, especially in like software development, is like a huge part of it. And so I think understanding when and how and where to do that is a key factor. For me, I wish I could tell myself that remembering that your career is a marathon and not a sprint. So enjoy the journey. I was such a like a focused high achiever. I mean, there's still elements of that in me now, but like I was so focused on that, and it was about the destination and it wasn't about the journey. And I wanted to climb every rung as fast as I could of that career ladder, right? And no, I missed out on so much by being focused on the destination instead of the journey. One case in point, that goes along with it is like not foregoing the things that you can't get back for a sake of the job that won't be there for the long run. I don't want that misconstrued as that I'm not a dedicated employee, because I absolutely am. And I think that matters, but it shouldn't matter over the things that actually should matter more. So for example, real quick, fast story. I'm a mom of 5. When I had my first kid, my first baby son, I took 2 weeks of parental leave. And I was just so like wrapped up in getting back to work and worried that I was going to miss out on, like, I don't know, whatever it was, right? There's no way I was physically, mentally, emotionally ready to go back to work. He's 16 now. He doesn't know if I took 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years off of work when he was a baby, like when he was a newborn. But to me, I do. And that's the stuff, that's the journey that's time I can't get back with him. That's too bad, right? Like I don't live with a lot of regrets, but that's one that I wish if I could have a do-over, it would be that, and just actually just live in that moment with him, right? And then real quick, the last one, 401k. Make sure you invest in your 401k. Compound interest is an amazing thing that will exponentially grow beyond your wildest dreams. And I wish I would have just understood how impactful that could be on my financial future a little bit better than I did when I was, when I first started out. So.
Eighth wonder of the world. No, that's fantastic advice. I mean, seriously, so many good pieces of advice for those that are starting in their career today, in the last couple of minutes of what you just shared. So thank you so much for that. It's phenomenal. Love it. All right, very cool. So again, kind of shifting gears here a little bit. You've been a leader for a long time, Natalie, and there's a lot. I mean, you've obviously risen up the ranks. I know that you're a phenomenal leader, from firsthand experience. I'm curious what you look for in your direct reports and those people that are going to be working for you?
I think that's a great question, Scotty. I really look to steal from the concepts from the ideal team player, hungry, but humble, hungry, smart, maybe is how it goes. But those three attributes, I think, are wonderful foundations of like what to look for. I look for people who are passionate about technology, eager to learn, lifetime learners. Of course, technical skills are important, but I also value people who are good communicators, collaborative, have a positive attitude. I like to hear about how they found success in their career. If often those stories are about how they personally did things and like that heroic sort of personality trait, that's a little bit of at least a yellow flag for me, because that kind of personality can derail the cohesive teaming effort that I think is extremely valuable and a key element in building high performing teams. I also look for gaps that exist on my current team, and I look for candidates that possess those skills, so that I'm able to have the most well-rounded team I possibly can. And then lastly, I'm a big believer in diversity. Diverse teams will make the best teams, and they're going to create, like, diversity of thought is going to create like the best solutions to the problems that we face. And so I think that people who can bring something different to the team is an important factor for me.
Very cool. Love how you focus on soft skills or attributes primarily. To your point, obviously there's a threshold for what somebody needs to bring from a technical perspective, but it sounds like a lot of that can be made up for by some of the things that that aren't just knowledge based. So very, very cool. And then I think to your point about diversity of thought, like by definition, our biases are things that we can't defend against, right? So to have other perspectives in the room to help us check ourselves with regard to bias, and to your point, just ultimately make the product more broad and focused better on like ultimately on the end user. I love that. So very cool. All right. Wow, we're doing great. We're just breezing through this, Natalie. So just a couple of more questions. And this one, again, based on your experience as an executive level leader working with the C-suite, I'd love to know what you think makes a successful technology executive in the eyes of, the CTO, the CEO, CFO, just the C-suite.
Sure. So I think someone is successful in a role like that it's someone who can balance, technical expertise with strong leadership and communication skills. So to the point you just made, it is, kind of that technical piece is table stakes, but it has to be coupled with soft skills. They need to be able to communicate the value of technology to the rest of the organization, and align the technical initiatives with the overall business goals. Explain how what that group is doing will help the business achieve what they're trying to do, and to connect those together. It sounds simple, but it's hard. If it were easy, then dime a dozen, right? It's also important to have a clear vision for the future and the ability to inspire and motivate others to achieve that vision. A leader's job is to define and communicate the vision and to inspire people to execute on that vision. I just think that's such a huge and important piece of this. People want to be inspired toward that vision, right? And then hire smart people, enable them, support them, and get out of their way. You hire them for a reason, so don't stand in their way to get their jobs done and do what they're meant to be doing. Let them do their magic. And then I do think there's a piece of culture involved here too. Like, you need to be the stewards of the culture that you want to see on your teams, and you need to be the example of that.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, all the way, back to when you very first started, and your ability to bridge that divide between the technology and the business. I think to your point that I mentioned some foreshadowing. I wasn't sure, but I thought that this is exactly where you'd head with this question, and it makes perfect sense.
And to that point, like, they need to possess the capability to take something that's complicated. Technology is generally complicated, right? and you simplify it. You simplify it and then you communicate that sort of simplified vision and the why in such a way that people are like, heck yeah, let's go and like do this. So
awesome. Very cool. Very cool. All right. So last question I have for you today, Natalie, is what trends do you anticipate, in technology in the coming years or perhaps the coming months, given the rate of change that we're seeing recently? But yeah, what I think I led my the last guest I had a little bit, so I'm going to try not to do that this time.
Well, I think mostly propelled by this LinkedIn Live, we're probably going to see a lot of water slide transportation. I'm pretty sure that's going to happen. In all seriousness, no, though, I think AI, I know people are kind of scared of it, but I just think like natural language processing, machine learning, it's just going to become more sophisticated and prevalent. I think, healthcare, finance, transportation, like being able to like leverage that in such a way where I think I read an article where ChatGPT was diagnosing like absolutely correctly things based on particular symptoms. And it's like, the more we can actually have like a chat bot that is like doing that, like, just allowing for enabling like that kind of accessibility to like that kind of medical care. Like, wouldn't that, that's just like, and that probably can happen tomorrow. So I think that's amazing. Blockchain technology, I think that will create new opportunities for secure and decentralized transactions. I don't think that's going anywhere. I think it'll just become more, it's a weird concept for people to like, what does it even mean?
Right.
Right. But I do think that we'll just see more and more of it being, foundational to revolution industries like finance, supply chain management, identity verification. And then I'm eager to see like what it can do in the various industries and how that might transform those industries. And then cybersecurity, it's going to continue to grow. Organizations need to, address that. The threats just continue to increase. And so I think every company is going to need to really focus on cybersecurity so that they can handle all the threats, that head their way. And so I think that that's definitely going to be on the forefront and just a continued focus. And then, although this isn't like a technology, I just think, again, my last sort of passion project of mine, just the diversity and inclusion in the tech industry. It's something I'm very passionate about. And I just think it's that approach to innovation and creatively solving these problems that diversity component really is like a game changer and a multiplier effect that I think can just make a world of difference. So
love it. Very cool. Yeah, I think you touched on all the hot buttons and that I think about, at least. And I think, the one area that I'd be curious, it sounds like you're obviously already making an impact on, but that's, education, technical education across a diverse, whether, no matter what it is, and particularly I think from a socioeconomic standpoint, how are you thinking about that? I have some of my own thoughts, but would love to get your take on how we educate the next generation to continue to, move the ball forward, so to speak, on all these areas.
Oh, goodness. That's a big question, Scotty. There's traditional ways of educating, but then there's so much accessibility to like information nowadays that I think it could be completely different. The way that we actually, you don't need a college degree. You don't have to go get your computer science degree. Like, some of the most amazing people on my teams are people who did like boot camps. And
love that.
And why don't we just have even diversity in how people have become educated enough to have the capability to have these jobs, right? And have the competency to have these jobs, right? For me, it's not like a one size fit, like here's the particular criteria that then equates to the right candidacy for a role. It comes in so many shapes and forms. And I think that if we can encourage other leaders to agree and maybe it's like the proof is in the pudding, but I've seen it myself. And so I'm a big believer in that. And so I think just more accessibility to it. And to your point about the socioeconomic component, in the US at least, like college is becoming so expensive. So why don't we, I mean, we could totally turn that on its head, right? And
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a huge game changer.
At the risk of devolving into a conversation entirely about policy, we can leave that for next time. But I mean, I think to your point, giving those folks a chance that don't necessarily have the traditional background, that, you know, that is, in my mind, the near term, for leaders. Any leaders listening to this, I hope at least give those folks a chance, right? Take them through the interview process. Don't make the decision based solely on, hey, they don't have a computer science degree, to your point, right? Because that's a barrier for so many different reasons. But yeah, again, we won't get into policy, Natalie. We can prep our audience that if we're going to do that in the future, that way they can decide not to tune in. But I really appreciate you coming on. It's been such a pleasure, honestly. We're 35 minutes in, it flew by. We've got a comment about, ChatGPT has designed a traffic system based entirely on water slides. So we'll have to, make sure that you get connected to that individual who, well, I'm sure, there'll be a chief prompt officer before too long here.
Right.
And I've got to give credit to Jepson, I suppose is now his name, Taylor, for that idea I saw on his LinkedIn post. But thank you again for joining today. It's an absolute pleasure. I did tag you, and Bob also tagged you in the comments here. So for folks that have watched that want to connect, I don't want to speak on your behalf, but I suspect you'd be open to some people reaching out, either connecting or just following you on LinkedIn, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, that'd be great. Love to. And thanks so much for having me, Scotty. This was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed my time chatting with you. And the question about connecting, absolutely. I'd love to connect with anyone who wants to. So.
Well, you're a leader in more ways than one, Natalie. So we could see some thought leadership coming from you on LinkedIn here. I know you're busy, but if you have a chance, I'm sure that there'd be demand for it. Thanks again for joining, and I'm going to wrap us up here. Have a great day.
Scotty.